In a distant future where humanity has become a dominant force in the galaxy, many alien species have fallen to extinction due to war, environmental collapse, and intergalactic strife. Among the fallen is the Valari, a once flourishing race known for their unique ability to adapt genetically to their environments. Now, only Lyra, the last of her kind, remains. Hunted by bounty hunters and studied like a lab specimen by galactic scientists, Lyra escapes to a remote human colony where she meets Ethan Kane, a reclusive human farmer with a tragic past. Desperate to preserve her species, Lyra makes an unprecedented plea. She needs Ethan to help her procreate. But as the two form an unlikely bond, they uncover secrets about the Valari extinction and the true reason Lyra's people were wiped out, a conspiracy that could put them both in danger. Chapter 1. The Last of Her Kind. The Orion Expanse was a vast stretch of intergalactic space filled with uncharted worlds, abandoned stations, and the remnants of forgotten civilizations. In this desolate region, a single spacecraft fled through the void, pursued by two heavily armed bounty ships. Inside the sleek, black ship, Lyra Velsin, the last known survivor of the Valari race, clung to the controls, her hands trembling. Her emerald-green eyes darted between the glowing control panels and the viewport, where the pursuing ships loomed closer. Her ship was an older model, a civilian transport she had barely managed to steal from a mercenary port. It was fast but lacked weaponry, and the bounty hunters were relentless. "They won't stop," Lyra whispered to herself, her voice breaking. "They'll never stop." The bounty on her head was astronomical. The galaxy's powers had labeled her a biological anomaly, a living artifact of a lost race. Capturing her meant fame, fortune, and power. Her heart raced as a warning light flashed on the console. Missiles locked. No, no, no. Lyra slammed her hands on the controls, diverting all power to the ship's engines. The transport surged forward, narrowly avoiding the first volley of missiles. But her luck wouldn't hold out for long. As the bounty ships closed in, a bright light appeared ahead, a human colony planet on the outskirts of the Orion Expanse. Lyra's eyes widened. If she could reach the atmosphere, the colony's dense cloud cover might provide her with enough cover to escape. "Come on, hold together," she whispered, pushing the engines to their limit. The ship groaned under the strain as it entered the planet's atmosphere, flames licking at its hull. The pursuing ships hesitated, unwilling to risk the turbulence. For a brief moment, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. A crash landing. The transport hit the planet's surface with a deafening crash, skidding across rocky terrain before coming to a halt near the edge of a vast forest. Smoke billowed from the wreckage, and sparks flew from the damaged systems. Lyra unbuckled herself and stumbled out of the ship, her body aching from the impact. The planet's atmosphere was breathable, but the air was thick with moisture, and the ground was covered in a layer of moss-like vegetation. She didn't have time to rest. The bounty hunters would track her down soon. She needed to find shelter. Lyra's slender frame and shimmering, scale-like skin made her stand out against the green foliage. Her people, the Valari, had been designed by nature to adapt to any environment. But now, her adaptability was useless. She was alone. The human encounter. Farther from the crash site, Ethan Kane, a former soldier turned farmer, worked quietly on his homestead. His property was a modest one. A small house, a barn, and fields of engineered crops that thrived in the planet's unpredictable weather. Ethan had come to this remote colony to escape his past. The war between humanity and the Dominion Alliance had left him scarred, both physically and emotionally. He preferred solitude, his only companion a scruffy dog named Max. As he worked, Max suddenly perked up, his ears twitching. The dog growled, staring toward the distant forest. "What is it, boy?" Ethan asked, setting down his tools. Max bolted toward the trees, barking furiously. Ethan grabbed his rifle and followed. In this part of the galaxy, it paid to be cautious. An unlikely meeting. Lyra stumbled through the forest, her legs weak and her breathing labored. Her sharp hearing picked up the sound of something approaching fast. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice trembling. Max emerged first, barking loudly. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. She had never seen a creature like him before. The dog sniffed the air, then wagged his tail, his demeanor softening. Moments later, Ethan appeared, his rifle raised. His blue eyes widened as he took in the sight of her, an alien woman, battered and exhausted, her shimmering skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his voice steady but cautious. Lyra raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. "Please. I mean no harm. I need help." Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. "You're Valari, aren't you? I thought your kind were extinct." Tears filled Lyra's eyes. "We are. I'm the last." Ethan hesitated. The pain in her voice was genuine, and her frail appearance suggested she wasn't a threat. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. "You'd better come with me," he said gruffly, "before someone else finds you." A plea for survival. Back at Ethan's homestead, Lyra sat by a fire, wrapped in a blanket. She watched cautiously as Ethan moved about the room, his movements efficient and deliberate. "You've got bounty hunters after you, don't you?" Ethan asked, setting a plate of food in front of her. Lyra nodded. "They want to sell me to the highest bidder. To dissect me, study me." Ethan frowned. "That's messed up, even for this galaxy." Lyra hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I didn't just come here to escape. I came to find someone. Someone who could help me." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Help you how?" Lyra took a deep breath, her cheeks flushing faintly. I need a mate. Someone to help me reproduce." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "What?" Lyra's voice trembled. "My people are gone. If I don't find a way to continue our species, the Valari will disappear forever." Ethan leaned back, his mind reeling. "And you think I'm the answer?" "You're human," Lyra said, her tone desperate. "Your species is genetically compatible with nearly every known race. It's my only chance." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process her words. "This is insane." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." Ethan sighed, staring into the fire. He had spent years running from his past, isolating himself from the galaxy. But now, fate had thrown him into the path of someone who needed him more than he could have ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Weight of Survival. Ethan sat in his small, dimly lit living room, nursing a mug of steaming tea. Across from him, Lyra watched silently, her shimmering, scale-like skin catching the firelight. The desperation in her emerald eyes was impossible to ignore, but her request hung heavy in the air. "Let me get this straight," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "You want me to help repopulate your species?" Lyra nodded, her voice soft but steady. "Yes, I know it's a lot to ask, but I wouldn't have come to you if I had any other choice." Ethan leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight. "Why me? There's a whole galaxy out there. Why not someone else?" Lyra hesitated, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been searching for years. The Valari are genetically unique. We were engineered to adapt, but our reproductive compatibility is limited. Human DNA. It's the only match." Ethan shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane. I'm a farmer, not some kind of galactic savior." Lyra's voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. "I know how it sounds, but you're my last hope. If I fail, my people will vanish forever." The room fell silent again, the crackle of the fire filling the space. Ethan stared into the flames, his mind racing. He had spent years running from responsibility, from the horrors of war. But Lyra's plea awakened something in him, a sense of duty he thought he'd buried long ago. "Hunted." Before Ethan could respond, Max, his loyal dog, barked furiously at the door. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he grabbed his rifle, motioning for Lyra to stay behind him. "Someone's out there," he muttered, his voice low. Lyra's eyes widened. "It could be the bounty hunters. They must have tracked my ship." Ethan cursed under his breath, peering out the window. In the darkness, faint figures moved through the trees, their armor reflecting the moonlight. He recognized the unmistakable insignia of Velcaran hunters, a ruthless group that worked for the highest bidder. "They're not here to negotiate," Ethan said grimly. "We need to move. Now." Lyra grabbed his arm. "You can't fight them alone." Ethan smirked faintly. "Who said anything about fighting?" A narrow escape. Ethan led Lyra through a hidden tunnel beneath his barn, a precaution he'd built during his first years on the colony. The passage opened into the dense forest behind his property, where the shadows provided cover. The bounty hunters quickly discovered the house was empty, their voices echoing in the night as they searched the area. Ethan and Lyra crouched behind a thick cluster of trees, watching as the hunters spread out. "We need to get to my ship," Ethan whispered. "It's about a mile from here. If we can make it, we've got a chance." Lyra nodded, her expression tense. "Lead the way." They moved quickly and silently, their footsteps muffled by the forest floor. Max followed closely, his ears perked and alert. But as they neared the edge of the forest, a sudden burst of light illuminated their path. "There!" one of the hunters shouted, raising his weapon. Ethan reacted instinctively, firing his rifle and taking down the hunter with a precise shot. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand. The forest erupted into chaos as more hunters pursued them, their weapons lighting up the darkness. Ethan and Lyra weaved through the trees, dodging blasts of plasma as they raced toward the clearing where the nomad's fortune was hidden. Trust and tension. When they reached the ship, Ethan activated the hatch, and they scrambled aboard. The engines roared to life as the nomad's fortune lifted off, leaving the bounty hunters behind. In the cockpit, Lyra collapsed into a seat, her chest heaving. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I've brought nothing but trouble to you." Ethan shook his head, guiding the ship into orbit. "Trouble seems to find me anyway. You're just the latest version." Lyra managed a weak smile, but the guilt in her eyes remained. "Why are you helping me?" Ethan hesitated, his hands gripping the controls. "Because you're not just asking for yourself. You're fighting for something bigger. And I guess I respect that." A dark revelation. As they drifted in orbit, Delta's holographic form appeared on the console, her expression unusually serious. "We've got a problem." "What now?" Ethan asked. "I analyzed the signal from Lyra's crash site," Delta said. "It wasn't just the bounty hunters tracking her. There's a deeper network involved. Someone powerful is funding this operation." Lyra's face paled. "The Dominion?" Delta nodded. "It's worse than we thought. The Dominion Alliance didn't just let your species die off, Lyra. They orchestrated it." Ethan frowned. "What are you saying?" Delta pulled up a holographic map of the galaxy. The Valari weren't just an advanced species. Their genetic adaptability posed a threat to the Dominion's control. If they couldn't be conquered, they had to be eliminated. Lyra's hands clenched into fists, her voice shaking with anger. "They murdered my people." Ethan leaned back, his jaw tightening. "And now they want to make sure you don't bring them back." A new mission. The revelation hit Ethan and Lyra like a punch to the gut. For Lyra, the stakes were no longer just about survival, they were about justice for her people. For Ethan, the decision to help her became clearer, though no less daunting. "We can't do this alone," Lyra said, her voice firm. "We need allies. People who believe in what we're fighting for." Ethan nodded. "I know a few places we can start, but it's not going to be easy." Lyra met his gaze, her determination shining through. "Nothing worth fighting for ever is." As the nomads' fortune set a course for the outer colonies, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was just beginning. Together, they would face enemies far more dangerous than bounty hunters, uncover secrets that could change the galaxy, and forge a bond that would test the limits of trust and sacrifice. Chapter 3. Allies and Adversaries. The nomads' fortune slipped into hyperspace, leaving the chaos of the Orion expanse behind. Inside, the tension between Ethan and Lyra was palpable, the weight of their situation pressing heavily on them both. While Lyra processed the revelation of the Dominion Alliance's role in her people's extinction, Ethan sat in the cockpit, charting a course toward the outer colonies. Delta's voice broke the silence. "Destination locked. We're headed to Kessa Prime, a frontier colony known for its, let's call it moral flexibility." Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the console. "We'll need supplies, a safe place to regroup, and hopefully some information." Behind him, Lyra stepped into the cockpit, her emerald eyes filled with determination. "Do you trust this place?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "Not even a little, but it's the best shot we've got." Lyra nodded, crossing her arms. "Then we'll make it work. For my people." Ethan admired her resolve, but didn't say so. Instead, he turned back to the controls, muttering, "Let's hope this doesn't blow up in our faces." The frontier colony. Kessa Prime was a stark contrast to the dense forests of the planet Lyra had crashed on. The colony was a sprawling expanse of makeshift buildings, dusty streets, and neon signs flickering in the hazy air. The spaceport buzzed with activity, a melting pot of species and characters from across the galaxy. As the Nomad's Fortune landed, Ethan and Lyra prepared to disembark. Ethan handed her a worn hooded cloak. "You'll need this. The fewer people who see you, the better." Lyra pulled the cloak over her head, her shimmering scales hidden beneath the fabric. "What are we looking for?" "An old friend," Ethan said, leading her down the ramp. "If he's still alive, he might be able to help." They navigated the crowded streets, passing merchants hawking strange wares and bounty hunters scanning passers-by with handheld devices. Lyra kept close to Ethan, her eyes darting nervously. "Stay calm," Ethan murmured. "They're not looking for us. Not yet." A familiar face. Ethan's contact was a grizzled former soldier named Rin Korvek, who ran a cantina on the outskirts of the colony. The Starlight Tavern was a dimly lit establishment filled with rough-looking patrons and the acrid smell of cheap alcohol. Rin stood behind the bar, polishing a glass with his cybernetic hand. He looked up as Ethan entered, a wry grin spreading across his face. "Well, if it isn't Captain Kane. Thought you'd gotten yourself killed." "Not yet," Ethan said, taking a seat at the bar. Lyra remained standing, her hood pulled low. Rin's sharp eyes flicked to her, then back to Ethan. "Who's your friend?" "None of your business," Ethan replied. "We need your help, Rin. Information, supplies, and maybe a few weapons." Rin chuckled. "Always the charmer. What's in it for me?" Ethan leaned in, lowering his voice. "How about a chance to stick it to the Dominion?" Rin's grin faded, replaced by a serious expression. "You'd better not be joking." Ethan gestured toward Lyra. "She's Valari, the last one, and the Dominion's hunting her." Rin's cybernetic hand clenched around the glass, cracking it. "Valari, huh? Haven't seen one of your kind in decades." Lyra pushed back her hood, revealing her face. The room seemed to hold its breath. Rin stared at her, his expression unreadable. "All right," he said finally. "You've got my attention. What do you need?" Unveiling the plan. Back in a secure room beneath the cantina, Ethan, Lyra, and Rin pored over holographic maps and intel files. Delta projected a detailed display of Dominion-controlled territories and key outposts. "We can't take them head-on," Ethan said. "But if we hit their supply lines, we can buy ourselves some breathing room." Lyra shook her head. "That won't be enough. We need to expose them. Show the galaxy what they did to my people." Rin rubbed his chin. "Easier said than done. The Dominion controls most of the media channels, and anyone who speaks out against them disappears." Ethan frowned. "Then we hit their archives. There's got to be evidence somewhere, documents, recordings, something we can use." Delta chimed in. "There is one possibility. The Dominion has a secure facility on Myrax 4. It's rumored to house classified data on their genetic cleansing programs." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Then that's where we go." Rin snorted. "You're crazy. That place is a fortress." Ethan smirked. "Good thing I'm good at breaking into fortresses." A dangerous bargain. Before they could leave Kessa Prime, they needed additional resources. Rin introduced them to a weapons dealer named Savax, a hulking alien with a sharp tongue and a reputation for ruthless deals. Savax eyed Lyra suspiciously. "Valari, huh? Thought your kind was wiped out." Lyra held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm still here." Savax chuckled. "Barely. What's in it for me if I help you?" Ethan stepped forward. "How about not getting on the Dominion's bad side when this is over?" Savax grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I like you, human. Fine. I'll help for a price." The deal was steep, costing most of the credits Ethan had left. But they left Kessa Prime with a small arsenal of weapons and the coordinates to Myrax 4. A growing bond. As the Nomad's Fortune sped toward Myrax 4, Ethan and Lyra found themselves alone in the ship's common area. The tension between them had eased slightly, replaced by an unspoken camaraderie. "You didn't have to do this," Lyra said, breaking the silence. Help me. I mean, Ethan leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. Yeah, well, maybe I needed something worth fighting for again. Lyra studied him, her emerald eyes softening. Thank you. Ethan shrugged. Don't thank me yet. We've still got a long way to go. A glimmer of hope. As the ship approached Myrax 4, Delta's sensors picked up signs of heavy security patrolling drones, automated turrets, and a small fleet of Dominion ships. The odds were stacked against them. This is a suicide mission, Rin muttered, checking his rifle. Ethan smirked. What else is new? Lyra placed a hand on Ethan's arm, her touch gentle. Whatever happens, we do this together. Ethan met her gaze, a flicker of determination in his eyes. Together. As the Nomad's fortune descended toward the planet, the crew steeled themselves for the fight ahead. Their mission was dangerous, their odds slim, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he had a purpose-a chance to make a difference. Chapter 4. The Fight for the Future. The Nomad's fortune descended toward Myrax 4, its cloaking systems struggling to mask their approach. The planet loomed below a sprawling industrial wasteland dominated by the Dominion's secure archive facility. Automated turrets lined the perimeter, and patrol ships buzzed like wasps in the atmosphere. Delta's voice crackled through the cockpit. Sensors show 24 active turrets, 2 destroyers in orbit, and a full squadron of fighter drones. I assume you've got a brilliant plan, Captain. Ethan grinned faintly, his hands steady on the controls. Brilliant might be overselling it. Rin Korvek, seated beside him, groaned. I swear, if you get us killed, I'm haunting you. In the back of the ship, Lyra readied her gear. She wore a lightweight combat suit provided by Savax, its design tailored to accommodate her unique physiology. As she secured her weapons, she caught her reflection in the polished surface of a console. Her emerald eyes burned with determination. This is for my people, she whispered to herself. The plan. The crew gathered in the common area, a holographic projection of the facility hovering between them. Delta highlighted key points. The facility's main archive is located underground, beneath several layers of security. You'll need to breach the surface, disable the defenses, and access the core servers. Oh, and avoid dying. Ethan pointed at the projection. We'll land here, in the shadow of the western ridge. Rin and I will create a distraction at the perimeter, drawing the guards and drones away. Lyra, you and Delta will infiltrate the archive and extract the data. Rin raised an eyebrow. And what happens when the Dominion sends reinforcements? We're gone before they get here, Ethan said. That's the plan. Lyra frowned. Plans rarely survive first contact. Ethan smirked. Good thing we're good at improvising. The infiltration. The landing was rough, but they touched down undetected in the shadow of the ridge. The team split up, moving quickly through the barren terrain. Ethan and Rin approached the facility's western gate, planting charges on a fuel depot to create a diversion. Ready? Ethan whispered. Rin grinned. Always. The explosion lit up the night, a massive fireball drawing guards and drones away from the main facility. Alarms blared as Dominion forces scrambled to contain the chaos. Meanwhile, Lyra and Delta slipped through an unguarded maintenance hatch on the eastern side. The halls inside were cold and sterile, illuminated by flickering overhead lights. Lyra moved with quiet precision, her heart pounding as she approached the central archive. Delta's voice guided her through the comms. You're almost there. The core servers are ahead, but I'm detecting a heavy security presence. Lyra nodded, her grip tightening on her weapon. I can handle it. The core archive. The archive chamber was a massive, circular room filled with glowing data towers. Dominion soldiers patrolled the area, their weapons at the ready. Lyra took a deep breath, her mind focused. She moved swiftly, using the shadows to her advantage. Her enhanced reflexes and agility, remnants of her Valari heritage, gave her an edge as she dispatched the guards silently. Reaching the central terminal, she plugged Delta into the system. I'm in, Delta said, her holographic form appearing on the console. Downloading the files now. Lyra watched nervously as the progress bar crept forward. Hurry. We don't have much time. Delta's tone was grim. You'll want to see this when I'm done. The Dominion wasn't just targeting your species, they've been conducting genetic cleansing on dozens of worlds. Lyra's stomach churned. Monsters. The download completed, but before Lyra could disconnect, the door to the chamber slammed open. A towering Dominion officer stepped inside, flanked by heavily armed guards. His gaze locked on Lyra, and he smirked. "The last Valari," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Your extinction will finally be complete." The standoff. Lyra raised her weapon, her hands steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "You won't take me." The officer laughed. "You're outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender, and I might make your death painless." Delta's voice crackled in her ear. "Stall him. Reinforcements are on the way." Lyra squared her shoulders, her voice defiant. "My people are gone, but I carry their strength. You'll regret underestimating me." The officer sneered, signaling his guards to attack. Lyra moved like a blur, dodging plasma blasts and taking down her enemies with precision. But as more soldiers poured into the room, she found herself cornered. Just as the officer raised his weapon to strike, the wall behind him exploded. Ethan and Rin charged through the breach, weapons blazing. "Thought you could use some help," Ethan said, grinning. Lyra's heart swelled with relief. "You're late." "Traffic," Ethan replied, tossing her a spare weapon. "Let's finish this." Escape and revelation. The team fought their way out of the facility, the data drive clutched tightly in Lyra's hand. The Nomad's fortune was waiting for them, its engines roaring as Delta piloted it remotely. As they boarded, Dominion reinforcements arrived, their ships bombarding the area. Ethan shouted over the chaos. "Delta, get us out of here." The ship lifted off, narrowly avoiding enemy fire as it shot into the atmosphere. In the safety of hyperspace, the crew finally exhaled. Rin collapsed into a chair, wiping sweat from his brow. "That was insane, even for us." Ethan smirked. "But we pulled it off." Lyra held up the data drive, her expression grim. "The galaxy needs to see this. The Dominion's crimes can't go unpunished." Delta nodded. "I've already started decrypting the files. Once we release this, the Dominion will have nowhere to hide." A new beginning. Over the following weeks, the crew worked tirelessly to distribute the evidence. The galaxy reacted with outrage as the Dominion's atrocities were exposed. Protests erupted on countless worlds, and alliances began to form against the once unshakable regime. Lyra, no longer hunted, stood at the forefront of the movement. Her determination inspired others to fight for justice, to ensure no species suffered the same fate as the Valari. Ethan remained by her side, his once isolated life now filled with purpose. As they looked out at the stars from the Nomad's fortune, Lyra turned to him, her voice soft. "Thank you for everything." Ethan smiled. "We're not done yet, but we'll face whatever comes next. Together." Lyra nodded, her emerald eyes shining with hope. Together. As the galaxy began to change, the bond between Ethan and Lyra grew stronger, proving that even in the darkest times, there was always a chance for redemption and renewal.